Tampa Bay Meteorologist Colleen Campbell, and we are here to do our weekly Wednesday weather segment. Thank you for tuning in here on our streaming platform. We always appreciate you guys checking in and nerding out on the weather with us. So we're talking heat. You probably guessed it, right? Because the heat has just taken over our area. It's been the top headline for weather stories here locally since the weekend, really, especially the weekend. We're going to talk about that big temperature that we hit in Tampa. I'm sure everybody knows about that by now, but what's causing all this heat? Let's start off with that. We have the heat dome, large and in charge. Usually we like ridging in our area because it brings drier, sinking air, but in this circumstance, well, that heat is dangerous, and it has sparked several heat advisories just day after day across our region. And in hand, we've had our weather impact alerts that we issue here as your team of 10 Tampa Bay meteorologists to keep you in the loop and keep you safe. So that all-time record high, we recorded that over the weekend, hitting that 100-degree milestone temperature in Tampa. Now, some things to note here. Where we get the temperature at in Tampa is at the airport. If anybody missed this breakdown and it's new to you, well, here's a brief explainer. So that temperature gauge is located at the airport, basically right next to the bay. And that particular day over the weekend, we had northeast winds, which usually in the wintertime, we like northeast winds because it brings us some cooler air, it can, off the Atlantic, but in this circumstance, it was blowing over some hot land, right? So that was one element to why we hit this 100-degree temperature for the first time. The other element is that the urban heat island, we've had a lot of building and development around the airport where that temperature gauge is located in recent years. Since 1970, we've warmed approximately 4 degrees in Tampa and the surrounding area. So it's been a gradual warm up over the past couple of years, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Building and development is a large one. All of that asphalt, right? You can walk across the grass pretty much all day on a hot day because the grass has a different albedo than, say, hot asphalt and cement, right? You can't walk across the cement in the middle of the day. It's too hot. So you think about all of that extra cement and buildings that we have in Tampa that's just been built up throughout the years, and that is called the urban heat island. So it's pretty typical that inner cities do see those hotter temperatures. And I had a few folks reach out and say, Colleen, you know, this doesn't make sense because there's areas in the Northeast like Baltimore and Philadelphia that have seen, and DC, that have seen 100-degree temperatures in the past. And that's one of the reasons for that. Those areas where those temperature gauges are located, those are also big urban heat islands. Usually in the city you have warmer temperatures. All right, getting to the heat index and how it feels right now across our state. So on the left-hand side in the white, you're going to see the actual air temperature, the ambient temperature, it's known as, and that's not including any humidity. So that's just the regular old temperature, but you factor in the humidity, and that's where you get these heat index values. Anywhere from 108, which is the threshold for heat advisory to be issued, to the highest number that I see right now is 112. And that looks like as you get into Jacksonville. So our friends over by the First Coast really suffering through the heat as well. So it's a statewide issue. And we're going to see here in a minute how it's actually a nationwide issue where this heat has just been taking over thanks to this heat dome. So again, here locally, these are some of your feels like temperatures currently. We are still stuck in those triple-digit heat index values. And guess what? It looks like the heat is sticking around for another day come tomorrow. There are a few areas that will be exempt from the heat advisory. We're going to go over that in just a second, but let's zoom in here to Hillsborough and Pinellas County, and you can see how by Tampa, again, by the airport there, it feels like it's 110. Now, some areas, Plant City, feels like it's 121. It could. I mean, it is inland, but that's really pushing it. So we really haven't had much relief here in the form of rain. We did have a little bit of rain earlier today, and that's one of the reasons why also Tampa hasn't really seen a 100-degree temperature in the past, because we get that breeze off the bay and off the Gulf. And then we also have those daily downpours that start up in summertime, right? Usually by the time we get into those peak heating hours around 3 o'clock or so, that's when we can really expect that rain to come. Well, the last couple of days, we really haven't had a ton of rain. In fact, we've had some drier air aloft this past weekend. So it's just a combination of things. But right now, yes, temperatures remain pretty hot. We just looked at the feels like temperatures. That's incorporating that humidity. But if you don't put the humidity in there, I mean, still, we're in the lower 90s. And that's actually pretty average. 91 is the average temperature for this time of the year. But again, that humidity really plays a big role. There it is. So the dew point's currently at 78. It's cliche, but we like to say air you can wear, because as soon as you step outside, you feel it on your skin. And that's where we talk about how this heat can turn dangerous. It's really important you know the signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke, because heat is the deadliest when it comes to weather events, right? You think what would be the deadliest weather event? Some people think hurricanes, some people think tornadoes. Well, those events don't really affect everyone, right? Heat is something that's can affect anybody, no matter where you are in the country. There's different criteria for these heat advisories to be issued, but anybody can experience heat. And if your body's not used to it, even here in Florida, if you are used to it, heat like this is something that can turn dangerous pretty fast. So next 12 hours here, again, we have that weather impact alert to just remind you that it's the hottest point in the day. The impact alert ends at 7 p.m. But after that, it's still going to be a muggy night. I mean, you can see temperatures don't get past the lower 80s for those overnight lows, and that's part of the issue too. When we can't cool down past 80 degrees, well, you can imagine we're starting off the day hot. So there's really hasn't been much relief here, and we just are stuck in this cycle that never wants to end. All right, so going into the heat alerts that are spreading across the rest of the country here, we've actually seen some of these trimmed back, but the areas highlighted in the purple color, that's an extreme heat warning. And again, different states have different criteria, just how often they experience the heat, how often they have humidity. I know in East Texas, I worked out there. East Texas is a very similar climate, close to Florida, just because the way that the Gulf blows in over East Texas, it does get very humid out that way, whereas Central Texas would be more dry. You get some of the air off the Rockies. And again, that's usually a severe weather zone. But so you can see portions of East Texas highlighted in that heat advisory. They have about similar criteria that we would have. But as you get into states like Tennessee and Tennessee up through, I'm trying to see my map here, Missouri, several states, Alabama, they're under that heat advisory, Mississippi, again, West Virginia, that's a good example right there, because that's normally a cooler state, right? You have the Appalachian over there, the mountains, you usually get some drier air, some relief from the Great Lakes, but again, everybody's feeling this heat. So zooming into our state once again, we have the heat advisory tonight until 7 o'clock, but then check this out. There's another heat advisory. This is tomorrow from noon to 7 p.m. Now, you'll notice that the National Weather Service did trim some of our counties from this. So for tomorrow, Manatee and Sarasota counties are no longer included under that heat advisory. Part of the reason for that being that we did have a little bit of rain across that area, and we will have some more rain as we move into the next few days. Also, we have a wind that's from the south-southwest, so that gives a little bit of relief, even though the Gulf temperatures are in the 80s right now. When we have air that's blowing off the Gulf, it does, even though it is humid, it does help us out just a bit, versus if it was blowing over land, which was what happened when we had that 100-degree temperature in Tampa. We had more of a land breeze versus a Gulf breeze or a sea breeze. So even though the Gulf is sitting in the 80s, it still helps us out when you have air moving over water. All right, so temperatures versus heat index for tomorrow. So this is a new little map that we made. On the bottom there is the temperatures, how warm it will be, not factoring in the humidity. And then you can see as we move into the afternoon, that's when we get into that heat index criteria. Now this is for Tampa. It looks like we'll be right at the threshold for that heat advisory. It starts at 108. Now, again, the National Weather Service did include Hillsborough and Pinellas County under the heat advisory for tomorrow. Some areas may kind of just teeter on that criteria line, which is the 108 heat indice. but it's the interior locations especially, those will be the spots that will really be toasty, not really getting much relief from that breeze as it comes off the Gulf. By the way, we have a dominant southwest wind, so we're going to pretty much be in the same pattern in the next few days. And until we can get a good substantial rainfall, we're really not going to have a ton of relief here. So we're looking forward to any rain that we can receive, and we'll get a little bit today. We've already had some closer to our coast earlier. We're going to get into that in just a second. But one more time, in case you're not sick of these weather impact alerts and, you know, kidding around beside, we do issue these for a good reason, because we want you guys to take this heat seriously. When you have heat index values that start at 108, there's just no comfort there. So again, pretty easy and simple. Just stay hydrated. Make sure you're hydrating all day long from night to the morning, or morning to night, I should say. You don't want to just be guzzling water when you're thirsty, because you're just going to sweat it out, especially if you're outside. When it comes to staying cool, there are some folks out there that do not have air conditioning. There's cooling shelters that are open in our area. I think some of those do close at 7 p.m. however. And again, since this heat advisory has been extended until tomorrow, I would make sure that you have a plan in place for tomorrow in case that cooling shelter you may have been using is not open or available. Something else that you can do, go to the library, go to the mall. There's plenty of places that are in the public, free to use, and have that AC that you can take advantage of. So we really suggest that. All right, so getting into our showers and storms and what our pattern has here locally. Well, first we're starting off on the bigger picture. See, there's a lot going on this surface map, but unfortunately it's not enough to really bring us a good substantial rain across our region and get those rainfall totals up. You can see a couple areas of low pressure, very disorganized out by Louisiana. That's bringing some stormy weather out that way. Of course, they've had a lot of tropical moisture as of recent weeks. So they do have a flood advisory that I see highlighted there right at the toe of Louisiana. That's that maroon box that you see. Everywhere else, again, pretty typical weather that we have here locally. We have that southwest wind that pushes the showers and storms closer to the Gulf Coast or the West Coast to start the day. And then as that breeze gets going a little bit stronger in the afternoon, that's when we start to see that rain push across our interior locations, which right now it looks like right around I-4 and north of that, especially Polk County, we do have those storms, and we have just enough moisture where a downpour is definitely possible, and that's great. So places like Lakeland will be temporarily cooler, still humid, but temporarily cooler thanks to that rain that's moving through. So we like to see that in northern Polk County, kind of help those folks out. Here in Hillsborough County, we also have a little isolated rainstorm that's moving through, trying to move into the Pasco line right now. And moving into future casts here, I want to put a pause on this so you guys can see what's going on. I'm actually going to escape out of this for you so we can walk through this together. So here we are moving into about 7 o'clock. And again, you can see most of those storms will start drifting their way over to the East Coast, closer to I-95. And again, that's because we have that dominant southwest wind. So whenever we're in a pattern like this, you can almost guarantee that you'll see the rain start off around the West Coast, move inland, and then it finishes off around the East Coast. So here we are. Around 9-10 o'clock, looks like Highlands County could still have a little bit of leftover rain, possibly a downpour. Overnight hours, nice and dry. And then we start the process all over again tomorrow, just before noon, around 10-11 a.m. We could have a brief little shower to a quick downpour in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, and then that rain does move inland as we finish off the day. All right, so now you're looking at how much moisture we have available in our atmosphere, and we often talk about this in the summer months because whenever we have closer to the 2-inch mark, so when you look at a map like this and you see that number up in the corner where it says 1.85 inches, so that's kind of like the magic number. When you see it closer to 2 inches, that's when we have a lot of available moisture in our atmosphere. If you think of a column, if you just took a slice of the atmosphere and put it into a column, a jar, right? Think of this visually and just squeeze that as hard as you could. How much water would be collected in the bottom? Well, when you get closer to the 2-inch mark, that usually means that we have a lot of available moisture in our atmosphere, and that's where downpours, although they may not be widespread, are more likely. Now, the areas that are highlighted in the brown, you see a little bit of drier air kind of moving across the Bahamas there, and that's entering into Friday. And then this weekend, some of that will start to drift our way. This is Saturday at 11 a.m. So it looks like we have a little bit of drier air kind of nosing in here for Saturday and Sunday, which is good for anybody with any weekend plans. That means we will have a drier forecast, but again, the drier forecast usually means hotter temperatures. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of danced on the line of that heat advisory criteria as we move to this weekend. 82 for tonight. Yeah, not cooling down past the low 80s. That's part of the problem. Entering into tomorrow, 94 for the daytime high. And again, some areas are excluded from that heat advisory, but in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, we are included in that. Touching on the tropics here, right now things are fairly quiet. However, if we go into our long range outlook, this is put out through the Climate Prediction Center, you can see they have highlighted a large area in that pink salmon color. So when you see an area that large, you know that the uncertainty is larger as well. If they kind of have this honed in on one tight little circle, well, then that means that they have a better idea of what could form. Right now, it's just very messy. Some of the models do suggest, the European model kind of sniffing out that we could have something trying to form off the coast of the Carolinas as we move into next week. But again, nothing with any big evidence or any, glaring evidence that we're going to have a tropical system form. It's just saying, hey, this is possible. There's less than a 20% chance. But if something did spring up, don't be surprised. But again, the models are just kind of in a sloppy disagreement. The GFS also has something that's trying to spin out in more towards the central Atlantic. So it's nothing that we're really concerned about at this time. And then as we move forward into August 13th to August 19th, so this is moving 2 weeks out, again, you can see this is the main development region that's highlighted. So that's the area where a lot of these storms are brewing. Or usually brew, I should say. It's the area where we have those trade winds, and basically we look for these little seedlings off the coast of Africa. It's also where a lot of Saharan dust has been lately, and that's why the Atlantic Basin has been so quiet, or one of the reasons. The other reason would be shear. But so this is saying that we do have a chance of seeing something maybe form. There's a 20% chance, again, as we move into the second week of August. Can you believe it's August already? All right, so just a brief reminder here for anybody that's saying, man, this hurricane season's been pretty quiet. Well, guess what? We're not even towards the peak of the season. Remember last year, we had 3 back-to-back storms. How could you forget, right? Well, they didn't come until October. So the peak of the season is September 10th. That's usually when the Atlantic Basin is the most active. I put a little "we are here." Friday is August 1st. So we're kind of climbing towards that peak. September 10th is when that peak historically and climatologically, when we usually see the most activity. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we will have a storm closer to home. It just means that that's when the Atlantic Basin usually has the most activity, whether it be in the central Atlantic, whether it be closer to the East Coast, whether it be closer to the Gulf or the Caribbean. That's not what this is saying. This is just saying that that is when things get a little bit busier. All right, let's bring you to your 7-day forecast. So again, you'll see that tomorrow now we have extended that weather impact alert for the second half of Thursday. So that starts at noon, and we're just in line with what the National Weather Service has as their advisory. Now, some of you in Sarasota and Manatee County, you are excluded from the heat advisory, but don't, take that lightly. That just means that you're not reaching that heat advisory criteria of 108 for the feels like temperature. You may be at 105, 106, as we saw in Tampa, but it just wasn't enough to trigger that heat advisory for you guys. But again, it will just be a degree or 2 cooler. It's not going to be this dramatic change. So we still want you to be cautious, even if you're not under that advisory. For the rest of us, again, yes, it goes from noon to 7 p.m. And then Friday is August. Can you believe it? So our summer just flew by. And rain chances are pretty consistent as we move into this weekend. Will be a little bit lower for Saturday. We just showed you how there's that drier air trying to sneak in. It won't last long. And then Sunday looks like we will have a front that's going to stall out, and that will increase our rain chances for Sunday into next week, which will be great because we really could use the rain, and that will hopefully help cool us down. But until then, things will be pretty consistent around here, and I wouldn't be surprised if more heat advisories would be issued. Again, we want you to take the heat seriously day by day, especially with the kids, the elderly, and your pets. If you're panting, your pets are panting, right? Humans don't pant, but if you're sweating and just feel like you just cannot get hydrated, well, your pets probably feel the same way. And don't forget their precious little paws. All right, so it was a lot of fun here, just me, myself, and I, and you guys too. And we appreciate you tuning in every Wednesday. And don't forget, we have our show that's coming on at 5 p.m. and that goes until 7 o'clock now tonight. So anytime you have any weather questions, we'd love to hear them and love to answer them. So for now, we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.